So I'm Faye Estrella. I guess I'll explain my poem after I do it. It's called Her Story Lesson. How could you? She asked me. How could you want to hear my story when you sneer at the curves of these shorelines, these hills and these valleys, weigh these round mounds pound for pound instead of appreciating the bounty that is this beauty? How could you? She asked me. How could you want to hear my story when you let these men come with their fire and their metal, with their hungry shovels, calling each dark spot or barbaric blemish a savage scar, while they dig deep and dig deeper, taking forcefully what is mine to gently give what is mine, become their minds to fuel the desires of empires? How could you? She asked me. How could you want to hear my story when you let these burnished bronze villages and cities of melanin be coated in the cream of their crop, until only pale husks remain a testament to the shame attached to those of darker frames, until my very loved ones see me as unnatural and stained? How could you? She asked me. I am your mother. That stoop in your back that they compare to a monkey's slouch was actually a sign of that loving gaze towards the rice fields that your ancestors harvested. You got that from me. That flat nose on your round face that they compare to a monkey's face, but is actually a sign of nobility that your ancestors treasured. You got that from me. And those slanted eyes that they compare to a monkey's shifty squint was actually a sign of that loving gaze towards the suns and stars that your ancestors revered. You got that from me, so how could you? She asked me. I am your mother, torn from my embrace by the jaws of civil strife and corruption, given into the arms of another, raised on a tongue your ancestors never spoke, on a history your ancestor was never a part of, and standards of beauty that make your ancestors something to be ashamed of. How could you? She asked me. I am your mother. I'm Maharlika of the Pearl of the Orient, the 8-rayed sun and 3 stars, the land of 7,000 islands, but you know me by the name of a Spanish king that has never even seen my shores. I am your mother, the Philippines, and you turned your back to me, forgot my face, my voice, my story. Why didn't you stop from the taking and breaking and enslaving me until there was nothing left but American-raised, corrupt, bloody-minded aristocracy masquerading as democracy? But how could you? She asked me. You weren't even born then. To see revolution after revolution, how I kept standing up. Even when they beat me down, even when they took away everything, I was unbowed because I knew my suns and my stars were spread across the globe, making the world their oyster and their home. So how could you? She asked me. How could you want to hear my story as if you don't already know, as if you've never been conquered, manipulated, segregated, and brought low, only to rise again and again, creating a community of allies in lands as distant as the red maple leaf in Turtle Island, to build a community that even your ancestors and your descendants would be proud of? So how could you? She asked me. How could you want to hear my story as if you don't already know that I am your mother and my story is your own? Thanks. So in May, I went back to the Philippines after I immigrated here when I was 3, and then I visited my family when I was 19, and then in May I came back for a social justice mission. We were there to observe the elections, but I was also talking to political prisoners, and so I wrote another poem, which I don't have with me, unfortunately, but it was more about the political situation there and the corruption. It has a lot of Tagalog words, which is the Filipino language, or one of the official. We have like thousands of dialects. It's like a giant island smorgasbord. So, yeah. So I couldn't. But maybe one day we'll hear that poem on YouTube. This poem is on YouTube, so if you're like, "Oh, this is so awesome," just Google it. What? YouTube. Anyways, so that was my inspiration for this poem, as well as just like growing up in Canada and. Actually, well, I grew up in Toronto. Toronto, what? And so that influenced a lot of what this poem is about, as well as struggling with, like, I guess, in university, I learned to call this post-colonial identity. And so that's what this poem was about.